All right. I call this meeting to order. This is the regular school board meeting of the Northfield Public Schools. It is Monday, February 10th. And Dr. Richardson, there were a few items.
There were a few items in the table file. Basically, some information on the Greenville Park Elementary overnight field trip, or as it has become known, Night in the Museum, which is going to be a camp-in of 5th grade students and 4th grade students from Greenville Park, and we'll look at that a little bit later. Personnel items, as far as appointments, increases, decreases, termination, and also the financial reports for October, November, and December.
Very good. If there's no objection, we will add these to the agenda as we move forward. All right. Public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the community to address the board. Is there anyone here who is here to address the board? All right. We will move on to approval of the minutes. Board members, in your packet you had minutes from the last school board meeting on Monday, January 27th. Is there a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Ann.
Second.
Seconded by Julie. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. The minutes are approved. Announcements and recognition.
Okay, we've got several announcements this evening. First of all, our 18 top spellers qualified for and participated in the 30th Annual District Spelling Bee on January 23rd at the middle school. The top 3 finishers have advanced to the Regional Bee, which will be held in Rochester tomorrow. 8th grader Hannah Paz was the champion speller for 2nd year in a row, and 8th graders Joseph Peshta and Elijah Lear finished in 2nd and 3rd place. I'm not quite sure how that's all working out. Okay, 2 alpine skiers, Cam Strike and Sky Soniga. Both sound almost like snowboarder names, don't they?
Yeah.
The last couple days with the Olympics. And 1 Nordic skier, Miles Broski, have qualified for the state meet. The state alpine is Wednesday and the state Nordic is Thursday, and both races are at Giants Ridge. Also, our Northfield High School music listening team at Northfield High School, which consists of Northfield High School juniors Henry Beimers, William Beimers, and Nicholas Pelletier, won the state music listening championship. This is their 2nd straight state championship. The winning score was 98 out of 100, which may be an all-time record score for any team in the history of the state music listening meet. And again, their coach is Karen Madsen, so congratulations to them. Also, Greenville Park once again participated in a voluntary fundraiser for the American Heart Association called Jump Rope for Heart. This year, 93 students raised over $3,300 as a community service event benefiting the Minnesota Heart Association. This is Greenville's 19th year participating in this event, and they've raised over $66,000 over those years. All students learn to jump rope in physical education classes and enjoy keeping their hearts healthy. And finally, Brighton Living magazine recently featured the Northfield Community Services Northfield Skating School for their Olympic month issue. In its 9 years, the Northfield Skating School has become a nationally recognized model program run by a staff of 14 people. Carrie Tinkelberg is the founder and director of the school. The United States Figure Skating Association takes notice of Carrie's work and invites her to give presentations at the United States Figure Skating conferences. She also writes its Basic Skills Program Director's Handbook. Recently, Carrie won the Making a Difference Award from the Northfield Healthy Community Initiative for having such a positive impact on youth. So again, congratulations to the Northfield Skating School.
Other announcements or recognition? Julie?
I just wanted to take a minute to recognize several groups from the high school that organized a pep fest for the middle school students in conjunction with their Spirit Week. And those groups were the Highliners dance team, the Northfield High School cheerleaders, and the high school rally group, which stands for Raiders Activity Leaders Improving Enthusiasm. And the kids put together a very fun pep fest. The middle school was rocking, and the high school students just did a really wonderful job. So thank you to them for that.
Other announcements or recognition? I just wanted to recognize the administration and the janitorial staff. On Friday night there was the one-act plays, the girls basketball team, and the waffle band fundraiser, and then I think the pep band played at the girls basketball game. So it was just all these people at the high school, which was fabulous, and it looked great, and I just thought about all the work that goes into it when we have a Friday night that's just full. So I wanted to make sure we thanked everyone for that.
Super.
All right. We are ready to move on to our first report, and I see they are assembled. A presentation by the robotics team. And
all right. Well, thanks for letting us come again this year. And this is part of the robotics team. We're part of FIRST, and FIRST is a large organization. I was founded in '89, and it's meant to inspire and encourage science and technology and make kids proud and explore all of what science and technology is. They have two core values. One is gracious professionalism. It's a way of doing things that encourage high quality work, emphasizes the value of others, and respects individuals and the community. And the other one is cooperation. It's the idea that teams can compete and cooperate with each other, both at the same time. So at the competition, we could be both competing against one robot one round, and then they could be on our team the next. So it's all about helping each other out and wanting to win at the same time. And FIRST is STEM. We hear about STEM all the time, and this is STEM, right? So we get a task, and we have to figure out how we're going to do it. And kids use a lot of science and technology and math and engineering concepts to figure out how we're going to compete in our game every year. So, and there's over 180 FIRST robotics teams in Minnesota, which I believe it's still more than there are varsity hockey teams. So. And FIRST is, they want to build our future entrepreneurs. So this is a kind of a brainstorm list that I was sitting on my couch this afternoon, thinking about, what are all the things that these kids get exposed to while they're in part of building this robot. And so, it goes all the way across the curriculum, and so, kids jump on and do whatever. And that's kind of the cool thing I think about building this robot, is not just building a robot, it's coming up with a business plan, making a website, just learning some self-confidence and leadership skills as well. This is our 4th season, and we've raised over $50,000 from local businesses throughout these 4 seasons. I wrote down a couple of our sponsors, and the cool thing is these are recurring sponsors, so it's not just 1 year. I think Granite Equity Partners and All Flex and TBC have been with us from the beginning, and they keep giving every year, which is very nice. We try to raise somewhere between $10,000 to $15,000 every year to do this. So last year was our best finish. We did 10th out of 60, and we also have this year 28 kids, and there's 4 other adult mentors besides myself that help out. Dave Erkey is one of them. He's a engineer up at District 1 Energy in St. Paul, and then Charlie Hayes is an engineer at Maltech. Brian Walker and Stephen Dunlap. And they're engineers. They work alongside the kids. They don't do it for them, but they offer their advice and knowledge. So the first week in January, the game is released, and we get 6 weeks to build. So we have no idea what's going to happen until that first weekend in January. And so next Tuesday is our deadline. By midnight, we have to have it done and in a plastic bag. So we have a lot of work to do. And then we compete at the North Star Regional at the March 27th, 28th, and 29th. And there'll be over 60 teams there from across the state and even around the region competing with the robot. So I have a little video of us prototyping our shooter mechanism. This year's game is called Aerial Assist, and maybe it won't work.
Is that on YouTube, Steve?
Yeah.
Can you go to YouTube from here and find it? I don't know if it'll...
Was that the one I sent you?
Yeah.
That one was not on YouTube. It was done with Windows Movie Maker?
I hate to type in prototype and shoot.
Yeah.
I put it on YouTube before I came, but
Oh, you did?
maybe I won't go. Oh well. But so we come up with, we kind of brainstorm at the beginning how we're going to play this game. This year it's called Aerial Assist, and we have to take that 2-foot diameter exercise ball and shoot it into a goal that's 7 feet above the ground. And basically we have to pass it from one robot to the next and catch it. And the more times we pass it between robots, the more points we score before we shoot it in the goal. So we came up with this so far, and it's basically like a large pitching machine, and the arms are going to move, and it'll shoot into the goal. So this is just an example. We prototyped up a catapult and the shooter device, and kind of weighing the pros and cons of which one's going to be the best. So then here's a picture of. Here's a picture of us at last year's meet in the pit area, which is the other robot that you see is from last year. And that one shot frisbees. If anybody came to our open house in the spring, you saw it shoot frisbees. And then this fall, we went to, there's mini competitions. This one was at Prior Lake. And I took a small group on a Saturday, and we went to it's called the Mini Regional. And we competed with last year's robot, and we got into the we were in the finalists, so we kind of took second place, I guess, in that group, and there was 30 teams there, so they had a good time with that. And one quote I liked from one of first mentors, Woody Flowers. He's an MIT professor. He says that we're all good, smart people doing good, smart things. So, and then I'd like a couple of these guys to come up and say why they're involved with robotics. So before they show what it can do. You want to start, Jackson? There you go. Jack's giving you a flyer. They came up with some promo flyers at the beginning. We give to our sponsors, show who we are. So
well, I joined robotics to kind of see how I could use a computer to program a robot to do an actual thing. And I actually have probably done more stuff than I ever thought I would. I not just used computers, but I also helped put the robot together and stuff. And it's really taught me a lot about computers and robot making in general.
For me, for a career I'm looking to go into is probably something in the engineering fields or the tech fields. And one of the great things about this program, robotics, is that it allows me to work on a design and then actually build a design and go from step one to finished product non-stop. And it's one of the very few ways someone my age can do something like this, and it's just a really great way of doing it. Thank you.
Last year was my 9th grade year at the high school, and I began with a class, 3rd hour welding, and that was a great class. I had many people in that class who were also in robotics, and so while they were in welding, they were stretching their deadline to try to finish their robot, and so naturally they took the time out of welding and began working on their robot, and I kind of gained some interest in that, talked to some of those guys about it, and this year joined robotics, and now it's been a lot of fun. I've been able to explore with different kinds of tools and different kind of mechanisms. We started out with a catapult, and now we ended with wheels that are driven by a shaft. I mean, it's been pretty awesome. So.
You want to show it off?
So far, all we've got is but it can go pretty fast. The cool thing about the wheels is it can go left and right. We don't have to do the turning, but we can still aim straight.
One thing we've learned over the years is that the more maneuverable you are, kind of the better you turn out in the end. So one of the things that they worked on this summer even was to get these wheels working, these special wheels that take a lot of programming. So we're gonna hopefully they'll help us this year. So does anybody have any questions?
Board members? Julie?
Well, I always look forward to your demonstration, and I guess I would like to have a vacuum that does that sideways. I'm so glad you spoke to how this class, or how being part of robotics has really opened up your thinking in terms of, maybe class or pursuit of a major. And I'm just wondering if anyone else wanted to speak to maybe how this has influenced maybe classes you want to take, or maybe majors you might pursue if there's any juniors or seniors who are thinking along those lines.
This is a class now, so they are getting credit for doing this. But if anybody wants to say anything.
I mean, is expanding your vision of maybe other classes you'd like to take that you maybe hadn't have thought of taking before you became a part of robotics? And I apologize, I didn't realize you guys were a class. Is that just this year?
Yep, it's a new thing we're trying out, I guess. Anybody want to say anything?
That's fine. I mean, you guys spoke to it already. I just thought if anyone else wanted to add any comments.
So let me ask the technical question. So with this robot, you drive it with joysticks, which then allows you to articulate it to the right and the left. Where this one that just has straight wheels that don't turn, you pretty much got to go forward and back, correct? Or does this second robot also?
It turns, but it doesn't go side to side.
Okay. So this one is just really, really maneuverable.
Yeah.
In terms of being able to move in any direction you want it to move.
Yep. So in the past, we've kind of gotten trapped in corners, I guess, with other robots that are maybe more powerful than us or more maneuverable. So every year we've tried to step up our drivetrain, I guess, is what. That's kind of the secret, I think, is.
So are these new wheels that you haven't had access to before?
We had
this type of wheel?
We had them last year. We just didn't have the programming done. So they're expensive. They're like $100 a piece. So we couldn't afford them the first year, so we've just kind of slowly been working to getting those operational, I guess.
So will these two be put together? So because I see the obviously the catapult or the pitching machine is the one that's on my right, your left.
Mm-hmm.
Will those be melded together before you have to bag it next Tuesday?
No.
Okay.
This one's the one we're bagging. That one we're just keeping together as it was a pretty good robot, so we're just keeping it together as a show.
So where will you put the ball on this one?
Similar show. We're not. Eventually, it'll get sucked into those wheels.
Put me in cold.
So it'll get sucked into the wheels.
Pulled in, okay.
And then there'll be a pneumatic plunger on the back that's going to push it through the wheels and go the other way.
Okay.
In the video that we did not get to show you, part of the prototyping that we did, we started at we thought was going to be an angle of projection, and we only got it maybe 2-3 feet up the floor. So we made this maneuverable so we could get it up to maybe about a 60-degree angle, at which then as we were launching it, we were getting up to maybe 8 8 foot above the floor. So then the objective is to get above this 7-foot barrier into this goal.
So I have a question. So every year you go, it's usually at spring break to do the big competition.
Yep.
What sort of things do you have to do while you're there? I mean, are there last minute adjustments? You have to make sure it gets over a wall? I mean, are there things that break and you have to
Oh, yeah.
fly fix?
The first day is getting inspected, so there's probably a rule book like this thick of all the things that we have to follow. And so 1 year, 3 years ago, we basically had to chop off 28 pounds worth of our robot. So, because we have to hit under 120 pounds. So, you know, it's fixing things, it's changing things so that it passes inspection. It's improving. We even have time to improve it if it's not quite working right or the way we wanted it to. So.
Carrie?
I think this is a question about cooperation, but you described the competition as being that you're passing the ball from robot to robot, and obviously you only have one robot, right? So are you passing it to other teams, and and are those your competitors as you're moving down the field? It's kind of whoever gets.
There's teams, so there's the teams that build the robot, and then on the field there's going to be alliances, as they're called, which are just teams of teams.
So there's 6 robots out there at once, and 3 on each team. And during the qualifying matches, there was like 9 or 10 qualifying matches for the final rounds. You get randomly placed with. You get randomly placed with 3 or 2 other robots for each match, and so that's why one round you could be competing against one, and the next one you could have them as your alliance.
Okay.
So, yep.
So are there interceptions?
Yeah, I mean, you can play defense. The only thing is you can't like intentionally try to wreck another robot.
Yeah.
So we're not like the BattleBot saw thing that you see.
No?
Do you all start out with the same package, all 180 teams?
Yeah, we get a kit of parts, they call it, but it's basically like what it would take to get the electronics, and there's like a sample of motors in there and other things that you could use, but it's not, I don't know, kit of parts seems kind of deceiving because there's not really like, here's your robot, you have to follow the directions.
Here's the blueprint. They don't provide any plans. They don't provide
This isn't like a Lego model
No.
that you just have to.
Yeah.
Each group does kind of their own thing.
Yeah. They basically give you a black tote full of stuff, and you can use it if you want. You don't have to. So.
Julie?
Could we have each of the students give us their names?
Introduce yourselves and grade level.
I'm Jackson. I'm a freshman.
I'm Christopher. I'm a freshman too.
I'm Jack. I'm a sophomore.
My name's Wiley Knieser. I'm a sophomore.
My name's Daniel Langhow. I'm a sophomore as well.
I'm Lily, and I'm a sophomore.
I'm Ben, and I'm also a sophomore. I'm Sean, and I'm a sophomore.
I'm Peter, and I'm a freshman.
I'm Nathaniel, and I'm a sophomore.
This is my 4th year with it, so I started.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Carrie, sorry, Carrie.
Do they film the competition? Can we?
I think so. I don't know like where it would be. I haven't seen it like on TV ever. But I know that there are film crews that are filming it. Yeah.
Well, if it is filmed, it'd be great.
Okay.
You should contact 45. I mean, they seem to
Yeah,
run all the
they
high
must.
school
Yeah,
activities.
it is a high school sport. That's kind of one of our goals is to qualify for the high school league tournament in May. So we have to finish. I forget. There's 30 teams out of Minnesota.
24.
24. Okay.
Yes, and there's 187 in Minnesota and 2,700 in the nation.
Can somebody help me to understand? I can see how this thing would push the ball back out using the piece. How do you catch the ball? How is this piece going to actually catch the ball if you're on the receiving end of beginning the ball passed back and forth? It seems like the way that's set up unless you're catching it on top and then letting it drop in somehow.
These,
What-
these arms go all the way down to the floor. And
Okay.
then these have a forward and reverse. These
Okay.
motors that we're using have forward and reverses. So when you want to suck it in, you can put it in reverse, and it'll suck the ball in, it'll grab it.
Okay.
And then when you want to shoot it out, you put it in forward,
Right.
and it'll shoot the
So you're
ball
not
out.
having to catch it like basketball where it's got to stay off the floor. You can shoot it, catch it on the floor, and then throw it to the next robot. Okay. And I'm also pretty sure that you don't necessarily follow any OSHA standards as far as moving parts, right?
Well, there'll be, we have to have bumpers, so there'll be some bumpers on it. And then we have to file off all the sharp edges. So.
Okay. Because it does seem like there would be some parts there that if you got
Yeah.
your finger into them, could be a problem.
The guarding, the guarding is, you know, at the end when we've already have everything done. So if you look at the robot on the right, you can see how we put plexiglass and stuff like that
Mhm.
to keep it contained.
To
You know,
protect.
So that will be part of the final
Okay.
installation once we get the working parts.
And then you Velcro it, to Velcro the plexiglass on to cover it up.
Yes.
Okay.
And that'll be by the time we get to see it in May, and
Yes.
sometimes we get to play with it, it'll be safe.
Yeah.
but-
Yeah.
It'll be safe for you.
Other questions? Thank you so much. We look forward to this every year, so it's really exciting to see the new innovation that's happening this year. Good
Well,
luck.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
It's great to
Thank
see a
you.
good class of students too involved in this. That's wonderful. I was thinking they actually had to catch it in the air and not let it hit the ground, but okay, that's not part of the game.
All right, we are ready to move on to our next item, which is the Director of Technology proposal. Matt, are you going to
Yes.
talk us through that?
Well, thank you for taking some time to consider this evening, and just to be clear, we're just presenting this as an item for information. So we're not asking for any, decision this evening, while you have plenty of time to think about it. But just a quick trip down memory lane. While it seems like I've been torching you from the administrative services perspective for much longer, it's only been about a year since we moved to this strategy. And I think we're really starting to realize some of the vision that we had in terms of aligning all of our back office functions with the educational mission of the district, which is the purpose of doing it. And just with the way that the timing worked, as you know, when we talked about that, we'd always talked about adding some other kind of technology leadership piece to the team, but consensus was that it was not the right time to try to add anyone to the mix, since we are going down the one-to-one route and the iPad initiative and some other pieces, and we felt consistency was important. And so it's at this time that what we're asking you to consider is looking at adding an individual as a Director of Technology Services, who would be at the same level as our Director of Human Resources, Molly Gieselman, Finance Director Val Mersdorf, Paul Bell, our Buildings and Grounds Director, Pam Huft, our Child Nutrition Director, really kind of a lead manager for that particular area. And one thing that would be a little bit slightly different from some of the other management positions that we have on our district services leadership team is the fact that unlike other positions, this one really will get into instruction more so than the others, because of the fact that you had a chance to take a look at the draft job description. It's really kind of working with the entire district on technology, but a specific focus in terms of professional development and working with staff and students. I've been kind of calling it a working head, for lack of a better term, and I think that we are primed to do that. To be straightforward, when we sat here and talked about administrative services reorganization last year, what we told you was that we believed that we could do it for a cost-neutral scenario. And I think that we have done our best to do that. We have not filled this position to this point. We still have $47,000 in savings from that reorganization. But putting that position at the same level as those other director positions in the end will cost a bit more. And at the time when we looked at it, we were thinking there might be a different level position that we would look at using in technology. But as we went through the summer and the fall, what's become very apparent is that to take us to the next level with technology leadership, we need an individual steeped in pedagogy in terms of the instructional side, who can translate that to the technicians and to people who are making everything run. So it is more than just a technical position, it is a leadership position. And so when we're looking at how to put an appropriate salary together package that would recruit will be at the exact same salary as other directors in terms of our year-round folks. Also, if you really think about it, the fact that we nearly tripled the number of devices that we have within the district by adding 2,800 iPads, and we've done that to this point with no additional staff. And I think if you were to talk to most people, the level of service has generally been relatively similar to what they had been used to in the past. Part of that is that we've leveraged some folks who haven't given direct technical support before. Our media specialists at the secondary level have stepped up. Mrs. Glazing is running a Apple Genius Bar out of this media center here every day between she and Mr. Divick. The same thing at the middle school with our team there, Mrs. C. and Mrs. Feldy there, along with the administrative assistants, Mrs. Harris at the middle school, and Mrs. Eggers here. So people have stepped forward, but what we're really looking for is to add that additional point of focused leadership. And while I have done the best that I can to continue to maintain that leadership, people deserve that additional level of focus, in my opinion. So what we would like to really do is recruit a special person. We would like to recruit a person who's visionary, a person who's gregarious, who can look at what we've done so far in terms of to support students and the kinds of things that you see here today. You know, that is something that before only a certain amount of kids who were involved in something like robotics had that access to that technology. We've now offered that to nearly every student every student at the secondary level. And we really are just looking for that visionary kind of individual who can help push us to the next level through focused and direct leadership that balances in what I think is really a translator, you know, a person who understands the instructional side of education, but also understands enough about technology that they can talk the talk on both sides of the fence, if that makes sense. And again, we don't need a person who knows how to program in C++ or someone who can run a network, but we need a person who can understand how those important things work and how to align those with our instructional needs. So that's an outline. I'll be the first to say that we had our best intentions to make this cost neutral when we started. We did what we could, and in the end, we were not able to make that happen. However, if you really consider what we've added, it's pretty remarkable that we're really only looking to add back this level of position as opposed to some other pieces. So I don't know if that frames it well enough for you, Dr. Richardson. There's something that I missed.
Yeah, and again, I guess my only other thought as we think about this, and again, we wanted to bring this to you kind of in 3 stages, kind of an item for information. Now basically it's a report item, and then to come back with a third time to actually talk about, is this something that the board is ready to consider? Is that, you know, I think as we originally envisioned this position, we thought it would really be more the back office, and because mainly as the Director of Technology position originally evolved in the district, the person really was not a person that really touched instruction directly. They were a person that really coordinated the networking and all of the other pieces that made sure that our infrastructure was solid, and that anytime somebody needed to get onto a device, they could get on and be reasonably assured that you could get the service that you needed. I think it's been very clear as we've moved forward with the iPad initiative and with other initiatives over the last year, that you know that focus now is really shifting, and it really needs kind of that dual expertise, someone that understands, you know, what the technical side is like, what needs to be in place to make that happen, but doesn't necessarily have to fix every networking problem or address every networking issue. But we also need someone that is going to be really seen by teaching staff as an instructional leader in terms of the implementation and integration of technology into instruction. Because I think, as we've told you guys multiple times over the last year, this is not about the devices. It's about what the devices can do for kids and learning. And our real hope is that in putting this position together and implementing it, we got the ability to touch a lot more kids and a lot more teachers on a regular basis with the kinds of skills they need to be effective. So that's really the direction that we're hoping to go with this. This is not one where we're willing to take somebody that just is a warm body. This is one where we really are looking for a very special person. And that the commitment that Matt and I would give to you is our intention is not to hire someone unless we can find the right fit, and that right fit has to be somebody who has both sets of skills. And we will be involving staff and potentially even some students in terms of the selection process to make sure we really get a high quality individual that is going to be able to hit the ground running on that part. So I think we'd stand for any questions you might have at this point. Again, another 2 weeks before we come back with an actual request or recommendation. We also would like to know if there are other questions that you need answers to. We'd sure like to be able to hear those questions so that we can research and have answers for you prior to the next meeting.
Board members, questions? Carrie?
I just want to have a better understanding of where the money for this comes from, and then my other point was just a comment really to Dr. Richardson's point that I think this is such an important position that I'd rather leave it unfilled than not get the right person.
I agree.
So I was pleased to hear that, but if you could explain more about how we finance this.
Yeah, some of the dollars will come from the savings that we had yet in the administrative services reorganization. So when Director Schauback left last year, what we did is there was some salary modifications to a handful of our directors because of the additional responsibility that they had. In addition, we had added a piece in our human resources office, an administrative assistant position that was long overdue, a handful of other small pieces within the reorganization part. So a chunk of it will come from that part. Another chunk will come just from like other salary kinds of increases that we do. It will be coming from the general fund. This is not a position that I would argue we could fund from capital. Our some positions in technology can actually fund a little bit from capital because they maintain the equipment that the capital projects or the operating capital budget pays for. Not the case in this particular scenario. So it will be coming from the general fund and just the same other pool of money that we use for salaries and benefits and those kinds of pieces moving forward. It will be similar to how we have funded things in the past that were in addition, such as RTI coaches. If you remember, we did a conscious effort to fund half of our social workers out of the general fund as opposed to special education. It's that same pool of dollars that, and as you well remember, you've heard us say it a number of times, about 80% of our overall budget goes to salary and benefits, and that's because we're a people organization, and that's what where it's going to come from. So there's no special pot of money that this is going to come from. It would come from wherever. And Carrie, I've done this for a long time, and I've seen a lot of different technology leadership styles, and none of us are willing to settle for anything other than exceptional. And we have people in place that can continue to do this kind of piece moving forward, and it will be more work for us if we were just to take someone who we think can fill the need at a basic level. I will tell you that there are some candidates we would consider who are really strong as a leader, really strong instructionally, have a good understanding of technology, but maybe need some mentoring. We believe we have the leadership team in place to do that. One of the advantages of this is that the person doesn't necessarily have to have strong executive leadership because they're going to be part of a really strong district services leadership team with Mr. Bell and Mrs. Wieselman and Mrs. Mergersdorf and myself, Mrs. Hupton, and we have decades of leadership experience between us. We can coach, we can mentor on those kinds of administrative pieces. We would take the person with the gregarious personality versus someone with just that straight administrative experience, if that makes any sense. We're looking for that special leader.
Thank you.
Rob?
Well, thanks, Matt. My first question was the one that you answered about the cost neutral part, which I had asked you before. I got two other questions, I guess. One is just about adding this position. I'm just a little bit nervous about doing it without looking at prioritizing staffing needs for the district in general, because Dr. Richardson was quoted in the paper saying, "There is no doubt in my mind that if we could afford to hire additional counselors, we would do so." A counselor, if you added one counselor at the high school for less than the cost of this position, you'd bring down that ratio to about 300 to 1 instead of 400 to 1. So, I mean, if that is a priority for the district, which is a statewide priority that we can do for this amount of money, why is this more important to do than that? So I would rather see some prioritization of all of the staffing needs that we might need to consider with this amount of money than just saying, because we now have 2,800 iPads, we need to add a position, which we knew we were going to have in the first place.
Right. And we had planned to actually add this position, 8 positions similar to this. It's not quite what we had envisioned last year, which is okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong. We know much more now than we did then. But I do think it's a fair point, Rob. I think if we were to open up the discussion for staffing needs within the district, there are always more needs than what we have. And I would certainly advocate that counseling staff is always a positive thing. I mean, it's a good thing for students. There aren't any positions that I'm aware of in the district that aren't good for kids in one way, shape, or form, because every position, if it's worthwhile, we have it. This district has gone through some serious budget reductions over the last decade, and I think anything that was not useful to students was probably gone a long time ago. I think it's a matter is one better than the other? I'm not in a position at this point without some additional analysis to make that decision. In this particular case, if I were to articulate my thoughts for the Director of Technology position, I think it's a position that would have an impact on every student in the school district through quality leadership, through empowering teachers, and through additional kinds of professional development, through ensuring that there's a common goal, all those kinds of pieces that you would get from a departmental leader who is focused on that particular component. How does that rate versus a counseling position or other positions that we might think have value for students? I can give you the best benefit analysis if we were to put those all on the table. Dr. Richardson can do that, but in the end, that's up to the board to make some of those decisions as to that particular piece. Putting them, stacking them, I'm not ready to do that yet tonight. But I do believe that this position is worthwhile, and I believe that it's something that is important to round out a piece that we started a year ago. But I very much thank you for that, because you're right, there's always going to be another 5 to 10 to 20 positions that we could have in a district that would make a difference for kids in some way, shape, or form. And we often talk about that. Our job is to constantly try to reprioritize what are the things that will make the most difference for most kids.
Thanks.
And Rob, I guess just a couple other things just for thought on this is, again, when we brought this to the board originally, we looked at the idea that the technology position would be part of the final package. All of the money that originally was generated to do that came from the elimination of a district level administrator. And we really tried to look at the idea of saying, could we get more people that had more direct connection to either subordinate positions or to students? So in the case of putting Paul, for example, put him with more direct responsibility for the custodial staff, for the building and ground staff, and so on. And I think, so as I look at this, I'm thinking about, okay, so the differential in dollars is really, it's not 80 something, it's 40, because that's the differential in terms of, we already set the 47,000 aside that was part of the original budget that came strictly from an administrative position. I guess I'd also would absolutely agree with Matt that I think the thing that we would have to play out if we were talking about trying to stack things or try to order things, it is the number of students and staff that are going to be impacted by this particular position. And where absolutely getting more counselors helps to increase or to decrease the number of students each counselor needs to see, the number is potentially a reduction of 100 students. In terms of working with this, we're talking about a position that has the ability to impact 297 staff members and 4,000 kids, because the person's key focus is going to be in terms of saying, how do you put a quality technology in front of kids and in front of teachers so they can do the most good with it. So if I was trying to balance, obviously, and as I said to Aaron the other day in terms of counselors, yes, if we had dollars to do this, we would look at counseling. But I think for the small amount of money we're talking about to do this, our potential to impact a significantly larger number of students and staff is there from this position. And I don't think it probably is legitimate at this point, given that we have not talked about the $47,000 being removed from district administration, to look at anything beyond the actual differential between the two amounts. So just some other food for thought.
And then I just kind of had a philosophical question about this, which was, rather than financial question, you say in order to continue the momentum toward transforming teaching and learning into a more personalized experience, additional leadership is needed. I kind of see a contradiction between personalizing the experience and then creating a top-down administrative position to oversee it. It seems like it's creating a mainframe for something that you're wanting to be a laptop or a tablet experience. So I know I think in presentations you've given before, you've quoted Scott McLeod, and just reading some of his blog recently, he actually argues for eliminating the position of technology director in school districts. He says, the mere existence of a technology director can allow other leaders to think they are not responsible for the integration of instructional technology. They see it as something separate rather than a part of the big instructional picture. And he says, in effective schools, decisions about instructional technology initiatives are more likely to come from district or building shared decision-making teams. This gives the decisions a bottom-up aspect that increases the likelihood that they will work. And it seems to me that when you've given presentations, the best examples you've given are when Mr. Eddy and Mr. Wieselman come in, or Katrina Meehan comes in and shows what they're actually doing, and so that organizational structure that actually makes teachers the leaders of this rather than having someone in the back office who's the leader seems to be more in keeping even with the nature of the technology, which is about personalizing the experience and putting it into individuals' hands rather than, having it all networked into the same hub.
Yeah, and having known Dr. McLeod for probably the last 15 years, I think if you were to read further into Dr. McLeod's theories on technological leadership in school districts, I think that the position that we are proposing falls quite a bit in line with his philosophy. His issue is with technicians running technology in the school district. And I think if I were to talk with Scott, I think he would say that I would agree with you. He is about the superintendent, the director of administrative services, building principals can't say that's somebody else's job. And I don't look at this position at all in that way. And if you look at what we've tried to develop with our administrative leadership team, the district services leadership, we are about collaborative leadership and supporting other leaders in the district. I don't view this as a top-down. I view it as a with-us kind of position, a position, as Dr. Richardson described, who is looked at as a resource, because the reason that we've had some staff be able to get up in front of it. You heard Mr. Wieselman say at the last meeting, Mr. Lear, our building principal, sent us to this flipped classroom scenario. It was at his suggestion that they did it. Sometimes it's about having that wide vision and being able to say, oh, here's a concept that we've learned about, and I think these are the people to do it. Folks in the classroom don't always see all of those possibilities, and it's not until someone suggests it or makes a point of saying that, hey, here's an opportunity for you, and then they take that and run with it. You're absolutely right. Those folks have led this, but it was at the suggestion of their building principal, that they did that. So I absolutely understand, and that's one of the reasons that we said, we're not just going to fill this position. This is not a technologist. This is not an information, a CIO kind of position. This is one that I would say has a foot in a world of pedagogy and shared leadership and coaching and those kinds of pieces, and one foot in technology, enough to understand where it's going, because we can't expect everyone in the district to know exactly where pieces are. It's not everybody's passion. Their passion is about how do we best teach kids and how do kids best learn. I look at this as kind of a spark plug kind of individual who will continue to get that going. I'll be the first one to say that technicians should not run school district technology. I've advocated that for a long, long time, that I really do believe. In fact, in the original job description, we were requiring a teaching license and an administrative license would be preferred. We did remove that because there is a growing group of people who did not have a teaching background but have been in schools long enough to where they are very powerful motivators in terms of working with teachers. And I've now seen enough of them to where I was comfortable in removing that one requirement. Does that make any sense, Rob, at all? In terms of its, I agree with you. We would not want to have a completely technical mind in charge of that. We can hire a lot of those pieces, and we already have a number. Our network manager, Nate Knudsen, an incredible technical mind in terms of putting together the infrastructure for this. We've got that kind of leadership already. What we really need is that person who can marry the two.
Yeah, I think that the descriptor I'd use would be, and it's not quite as good as what we heard earlier that I now have already, it's already gone out of my brain already, the combination of the two words, but the
Cooperation?
Cooperation, yeah. But really this person I see, the best word is integrationist. Their role is to really help to support and integrate the technology into the learning, and they have enough skill and charisma to work with staff to make that happen. They have enough understanding about instruction and pedagogy that they can go into a classroom and model that for a teacher or support a teacher as they're doing it, and then let a teacher fly in terms of getting that to happen. If I was kind of describing it, I'd say the closest kind of positions we currently have are kind of our RTI coaches. Mm-hmm. If you think about it, those folks have spent a lot of extra time learning about the ins and outs of RTI. But the main reason they're successful is they go into the classroom with the teacher, they go into the PLC, they say, let's take a look at the kids you have, let's talk about what it is that they need, let's figure out a good solution to help these kids learn, and then I'll model it for you. I'll walk with you along the way as you begin to learn how to do it, but I'm going to expect you to eventually take the reins and work with it, and then I'll help you make sure it happens. And I really see this position as having that kind of a motivation with a broad range of staff. We know that we have teachers that in the SAMR model are everywhere from probably 0.5 to 4. Some that aren't even through into the substitution piece, they're still really trying to work those pieces out. We got other people that are going 90 miles an hour, their hair on fire. They really have caught it and they know where they want to go. And I really think that this position has the potential, with the right individual, to really provide the same kind of support and technology that the RTI coaches have been able to provide in terms of intervention for kids. So that, I guess the word again, integrationist, is as opposed to technology director, because I think the technology director has all the old connotations of almost the same connotations as librarian We don't use librarian anymore either because of the fact that librarians were all about protecting books and not allowing people to really have much contact with them in many cases.
You know, and there are a lot of districts that have what they'll call a technology integration specialist, and it's actually essentially our RTI coaches, but they're totally focused on technology. Some districts will call them digital learning specialists. You know, really, I would consider
knowledge navigators.
Yeah, I think this person would be your chief integration officer, for lack of a better term, because one person or a group of people, in terms of motivating and getting everyone on board, you need someone who can really help get that ball rolling and really take advantage of people's skills. We just had a discussion today. I don't know if you've seen these things called Google Helpouts. It's kind of a very innovative piece where you can go on Google and people have a particular skill set that they will share with you over a Google video piece. We're actually looking at potentially remodeling some of our tech boot camp around that model, but in person. So rather than coming to tech boot camp for a day and sitting in with 15 or 20 other people, you know, with Mark Thornton, who's sharing something about Schoology, we may have part of that day where there are 15 time slots that you can sign up for a one-on-one session, almost a coaching session with Mark Thornton to be able to, and I see this individual leading the leaders of that, you know, in terms of trying to inspire as many people as possible to be able to share what they have. When you get those dominoes falling is where we will really see the additional benefit. And so I think the chief integration officer might be the best way to put it.
Other questions? I have two. Okay. One is an accounting question and one is on the description. So this is an accounting, probably a dumb question, but Stephanie left approximately January of 2013 or whenever.
Sure.
So if this position weren't filled until July, we'd have a year and a half. So the first year the person was on board, we need less from the general fund?
In July 1, we would need, you know, as much as it would cost, but there would have been some additional in the bank.
Right, we'd have a year and a half worth of savings.
We'd have banked a year and a half of savings before
I mean, that doesn't help.
implemented this. It doesn't help in terms of the long-term piece, but it does mean that we've banked a year and a half's worth of savings that we've not spent, and that just has gone into the general fund balance.
And there's even a little bit, you know, for example, the HR position that I mentioned that was part of that didn't start until I want to say, you know, May 15th. Now, you know, it's but the point is that yes, there would have been some but once it starts, you know, especially if it starts in a fiscal year, you don't really necessarily realize savings that year. It's based upon the savings that you had before. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then on the position description, so I understand the heart of what you're saying about this position, but the concern I have is when I look at the balance of 50% visionary, quarter of the time professional development, quarter of the time managing all the staff. And it's going to be a special person who can really make that happen. Is it possible for you to kind of say what would a week in the life of this person be like? I mean, how do they do that? I could just see getting sucked into managing the people and maybe doing one professional development thing, and how do you have time to do half your time supposed to be this more visionary aspect? And it's a concern that will the heart of the position that you're describing, is that possible to get, you know, filled by someone? Can they really manage that? I mean, what would a week look like if you were that person?
There's no common week. Yeah, there's no common week. You know, we always struggle with really getting to the detail of what % of a time will a person do a particular part of the job. And when we wrote this, we wanted to write it with what our hope is, you know, in terms of that we really want, if you look at the job description, we're focusing on vision and professional development, with the management part being the least, which actually goes right to what your point was before, Rob, in terms of really looking at that person that's accelerating this rather than being the technocrat, so to speak. The one thing that I do know is that anytime you have a vision for a job description, it's all about who you hire. And under our direction, we will certainly be encouraging the individual to say, we want you to be working with people about being innovative and visionary, and working with the other people that we have in place to make sure that the professional development pieces are in place. Not that that person has to lead them all, you know, but that they're working with media specialists to make sure that we have our ongoing during the school year professional development. This person would have a little bit more time to be able to do some of that individual consulting. That person could be developing the cadre of people. Hey, if you need to talk about how to create a discussion board in Schoology and how to manage it, here are the 4 people that are experts at that, and partnering some of those folks, together. So what do a couple weeks look like? I don't think there are any 2 weeks that look the same. The summer would certainly look different from the school year. In the summer, I would anticipate you're doing much more of that professional development piece, around our tech boot camp and how that idea continues to evolve. There are going to be natural parts of the year where the management kicks in more, those couple of weeks before school starts, certain planning times, which really are kind of a combination of two of the. If you see a lot of our job descriptions, we have 9, 10, 12 points. We wrote this one with 3, because what we want you to do is to point the direction of where we're going. We want you to coach people in terms of how to make sure that we can help us get there, and we want to make sure that we have that back end support to make sure that the I's get dotted and the T's get crossed.
That's really helpful. Thanks.
And the advantage for that last piece is we've got a really solid tech team in terms of the people that are doing the maintenance of the network and the maintenance of individual devices. So that, I think the good piece there is the right person in terms of the management side of that is going to require a limited amount of time toward that piece. It's not no time at all, but the focus really is around the staff development and the really integrating and helping to support the integration of the technology.
And I think the other thing that's a little bit different about this setup than in some other cases, the advantage of this scenario is that the Director of Administrative Services position, my position, is if Paul, I work with Paul very closely on some things where he's got part of it and I've got a little bit of part of it. And with Molly, it's the same thing with Val. So where this, I think what we can try to free them up from some of the administrivia because of the partnering of the leadership that we have. And my experience, especially with this position, I can really help this individual to stay on the focused path, because I can take care of some of those things that might be I will still do things like the E-rate. I will still do some things like the technology plan and helping them with that visioning activity. So they don't have to do it alone. And I think that's one of the great strengths of our administrative leadership team, is that we're not doing it alone. We're doing it in collaboration, and we know that collaborative leadership is the best kind of leadership.
Carrie?
I just have one more question. So this person would report to you?
Correct.
Feels like they would work very closely with Mary Hansen.
Correct. Mary Hansen is here, and yes.
I'm just trying to get a feel for how that all works.
Well, Mary and I have worked together for a long time over the years, and I think that between the two of us, we are good knowledge. And in fact, in a lot of districts, and at some point, maybe this position does change and end up reporting to the Director of Teaching and Learning. I think because of our individual structure right now, it makes sense to have it report to the Administrative Services Director. But Mary and I collaborate on a number of things. We put together professional development days in January. We're talking about starting an ed camp here next year, which is really an exciting concept. We'd be happy to talk with more of you. So if you think about our other structure with a superintendent of schools and then a Director of Teaching and Learning focused on the instructional side, a Director of Administrative Services focused on the back office side, and aligning all those pieces with our core mission, collaboration between administrative services and teaching and learning is a necessary occurrence that happens several times a week. So I think that some other districts where it's siloed, I'd have concerns. I'm not worried about that at all here, in terms of, I think that the way that we've set this up with our leadership team, that we're going to have really quality community. And you'll see in the job description, it actually talks about coordinating with the Director of Teaching and Learning on a significant chunk of the job.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. That was a good question.
Other questions? All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we are now ready to move on to our items for individual action. And the first item is the renewal of the capital roof bonds. Matt?
Yeah. And I've got Paul here tonight, too, to help answer any questions that come up of a technical nature on the project. But as we gave you a heads up the last time, basically we are one of our capital facility bonds that was originally issued in 2004 was recently paid off. And as you know, when Dr. Richardson came to Northfield, he really focused on using this capital facility bond option to help have a long-term strategy for dealing with our facilities issues, specifically roofs. Roofs obviously are very expensive, and for districts that don't maintain them, they get into an emergency situation. This is again a situation where we're operating from a position of strength. The roofs that we need to look at replacing are the M and D wings at the high school, as well as a complete roof replacement and exterior repair at Greenvale Park. And so what we're proposing is the exact same bond as what expired, $1,525,000. We'd pay it back over 11 years. Just to remind you what the capital facility bond, it's a financing strategy that school districts use. It's really a neutral kind of scenario, because what we're doing is we're getting the money up front, and then what we're doing is we're actually committing for that period of time, 11 years, a chunk of money out of our operating capital budget to be able to cover that cost. And it's a way similar to that you might do some things in your home of getting that loan up front and then just paying it back over time. We know that we have done this for the previous decade, so it's something we're already used to in terms of having that piece coming from our operating capital procedure, and we think that it's obviously just a piece that we want to keep going with our roof repairs. And Paul has done an excellent job of putting together a quality plan. We were waiting for the review and comment from MDE, which we got on Friday, I think it was Friday, which was a positive review and comment. And so if you were to approve this resolution tonight, what will happen is we will get it posted in the newspaper. There's a 30-day time period. This is an interesting piece because it can be a reverse referendum. So if I believe it's 15% of people within the tax jurisdiction were to request a referendum, that we would have to do that. It's not something that you see very often, because this really comes down to stewardship. We're looking at using existing funding, but we're getting it up front to make sure that we can continue to maintain the important facilities that we have. And we're entering into the facility planning process, but we know that these buildings are going to need roofs regardless, and it's better to do it now than later.
I think a couple of other really important pieces, as Matt said, the whole concept here is that there is no additional cost to taxpayers. We're simply going to identify a portion of our existing operating capital budget and use it to pay back the bonds over the course of the next 11 years. What it allows us to do is to maximize the way we use that money, because obviously we're doing a major roofing job. Our ability to get the best price really is accentuated. The issue, if you were trying to do it otherwise, would be that you'd end up with 10 piecemeal jobs, where you'd be sectioning off individual portions of roofs and saying do this, and at that point then the contractor is going to raise the cost significantly, plus every year you do not complete the roof, the price of materials and the price of labor goes up. So this, in my mind, is just as it was 10 years ago, a real opportunity for us to get major work done in terms of getting roofs redone and doing it in a way that is the most cost effective and is the best stewardship for the dollars that we have in place. And again, the bottom line is there is not one additional dollar of taxation to our taxpayers. So again, I think that's a real important thing to come out of this discussion, is that it simply is a vehicle that allows us to get the money now so we can make the most effective and efficient use of the dollars immediately, and then pay it back over that 11-year stretch.
Before we have any questions or comments, since it is an item for individual action, I would ask that we had a motion on the table. Noel moves to support the superintendent's recommendation to approve the resolution stating the intention of the school board to issue general obligation capital fund bonds as described here. Seconded by Carrie. Question? Julie.
I had two questions. It said that the bond matures within 15 years, but we're paying it back within 11.
Correct.
So how does that work?
We pay it off in 11 years.
Okay, and is that just based on the payment we're able to make, or?
We worked with a financial planning firm, and this is what we tend to try to do, is do it in that 10, 11-year time frame. And I think we could go longer, but there are some maximums in terms of, I think 15 is the longest that you can go, if I remember correctly. But of course there's an advantage because there's some interest with this. if we pay it off faster, it's a better financial deal for us in terms of our operating capital budget as we move forward.
Okay, good. And this
I
might
think
be-
the other thing you'll
oh,
notice
sorry.
too on page 2 of the bond debt service information, the idea is that that gives us an almost identical
Payment,
dollar amount
yeah.
to pay each year. So again, we determined what we could reasonably afford to pay in each year. The process at about $170,000 per year. This gives us the ability to play that out, and obviously the principal goes up as the amount of debt service or interest that we have to pay goes down. And so this allows us to have a flat dollar amount each year that we pay out over that period of time.
And then my second question might be for Paul. I was just interested in what the market is like currently in terms of competitive type bidding process. Are contractors out there looking for work still, or has the market changed slightly?
Things are really tough, and as Matt knows, I've really been pushing for our paperwork to come in because, especially with the long winter, the contractors are still finishing up work from last fall, and so we're really expecting that prices are going to even be higher. The bids aren't going to come in very good. So by getting a jump on it like we are, by getting approved tonight, in 30 days I can go out for bids, and hopefully I can beat the other school districts and try to get us in first and then get our jobs lined up. Because again, we have such a short window. We're looking at, from June 10th to August 10th, we have to have this work all done.
We could have snow on either side of that.
Right.
No.
So we're a little nervous, and we were sort of hoping that it would come out a little better. There's another piece of the high school that we wanted to be able to get in if the pricing came in good, but I'm not very optimistic. So we're just hoping we can get everything done that we want to get done. But again, we'll know, in a couple of 6 weeks anyways, I'll have the bids in and we'll know what's going to happen. So.
Okay, good.
I think one thing Paul has shared too is that by getting out early, if there are parts of the roofing project that we could start before the end of the school year, which we would of course be very diligent about ensuring the best we can not to disrupt any kind of instruction. But every other school district has to, they look to completely wait till after the school year is over. And Paul has found that there's an opportunity for some significant savings if there are parts of the project that we can do before the end of the school year. And we're trying to explore that within reason, of course. But it's an opportunity, since we are ahead of the game in this process. We have a chance for some other districts who are looking at this in, say, March or April, wouldn't even have that opportunity. So trying to take advantage of all the savings that we can within reason.
Other questions?
The good thing is too, after this, we're really in good shape on our roofs. We're going to have everything basically done, but about 15% of the high school. And the next ones really aren't until Bridgewater, which is only 12 or 13 years old now, and should be 20 years. We'll be looking at 7, 8 years. In the middle school, of course, it'll be another 10 years. So again, as we pay off these, in 10 or 11 years, it'll probably be another roof project or something. But it's sort of nice that we have this, knowing a plan, having a plan in place. I know it makes my job a lot easier, because I know where to put my monies for maintenance. Like Greenvale, knowing it's not going to get done, I save money by not putting a lot of money to that roof to keep maintaining other roofs to make sure everything is in good shape. And then we'll just put the money to get Greenvale done. That way we can maximize the roofs and try to at least get 20. Some of the areas of the high school are only going to be 17 years old and we're replacing them. And that's a disappointment, because you want to get at least 20. So we'll try to make sure that we get that full 20 by maintaining everything, really inspecting everything, and keeping this good plan going and keeping on top of it. So.
Thanks, Paul. Other questions? I was really pleased to hear that the MDE had moved forward on the review and comment. Having this option and no additional cost to taxpayers, and knowing that depending on how we vote, that we don't have to wait for MDE then.
Correct. Yeah, everything is ready to go, and again, that gives us the shortest window from now till when we can actually go out for bid. And again, you should be able to put us on the front end of school districts who are going to do bidding for this spring and summer. So again, our desire is to try to get this done as effectively and as quickly as we can, but we also want to make sure, and wanted to make sure we had a plan in place to kind of follow up on that long-term stewardship that we've demonstrated in terms of the rough pieces in the past.
All right. Well, we have a motion and a second on the table. There's no other questions. All those in favor of approving the superintendent's recommendation to approve?
Excuse me, this has to be a roll call
Oh.
vote. It's a resolution.
Because it's
Oh.
a resolution.
Oh, yes, it is, sorry. Okay.
Maple?
Aye.
Pritchard?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Hardy?
Aye.
Stratmon?
Aye.
And Iverson.
Aye. Thanks, Jonathan. All right, our next item is the proposed rescheduling of full-day closures. And we're going to treat those as two separate motions when we get to that point.
Yes.
Do you want to describe?
If we can, I'd like to do that. Again, just to give you an opportunity, if you want to look at one and not the other. As you know, this is something I brought up to you last time. And again, just with the concerns that I have of having watched all of our neighbors to the north being at 5 days. And again, I think we've been able to be very conservative again in terms of how we've addressed the issues in terms of cold and snow. But we traditionally, if you think about it, last year when we lost our 3 days, it was March, April, and May. And so what I wanted to do is to try to get out ahead of this, that if in fact we would end up with a significant number of additional days, we would have a plan in place to deal both with the 13-14 and the 14-15 year. So again, we've handled a piece of 14-15 by making the adjustments in the 14-15 calendar that have created now a potential makeup day for 14-15, which is on the President's birthday date, and also have set aside a date for a teacher makeup day that would be on the 8th of June. For this year, we really don't have any of those options to look at. And there are really no other days now, barring going on a Saturday in a week that you had less than 5 days, which is legal to do. But as you say, I hear some giggling over here. Or, going in and trying to take a piece out of spring break, neither of which I think is a reasonable piece. So again, my proposal is for 13-14 is to do the makeup days for the 4th and 5th days as just teacher workshop days. If we end up in that setting, we would really work to create quality staff development activity, probably a reflection kind of a strategy, maybe even some technology pieces that we could do. But for those first 2 days, it would really just be staff. The 6th day out, we would flip that and look at moving to student contact days. And the key issue there is if we do that, now we're back to kind of the initial discussion I've had with board members who've been on the calendar committee through the years of saying, you really got to have 3 days in a week before you can make sense of really trying to put a week together. And knowing that for secondary students, and especially for high school students, we do 3 days of finals, then legitimately we could actually push the finals a week back. That would not change the senior graduation date, it would not change the senior out date, but it would adjust it for students in grades K through 11. Then for 2014-15, we have again a little bit of flexibility of getting that 3rd day nailed down. If we have it before February 16th, 13th, we can actually use February 16th as the student contact day. After that, we'd be looking at counting again teacher workshop days for the first 3 days if we go that direction. But then when we get to day 6, we'd again kick in with 3 student contact days on the 8th, 9th, and 10th of June, which would be the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then follow that up with a teacher workshop day on the Thursday. So again, I just feel it's important for us to have the discussion and decide if there's a direction that you want to go. I absolutely do understand that This is a more difficult decision or discussion around what's going on in 2013-14, because likely we could have people that have already set up vacations or other kinds of activities for that week of June the 9th, and potentially could legitimately say to us, this is really going to put a kink in my summer plans. I think if we go out a year, I think hopefully everybody could be prepared to deal with that. I also would share with you that as we get to 2015-16, we can do some work to address those days differently. Because at that point then, we should be able to come back to a shorter winter break, because we could actually put 3 days, we could put 3 days in that week before the Christmas holiday. We could get 3 days of school in, and in which case, if we went out to the end of the June 10th week, which would be the first full week in June, we would have the ability to build some days in, and we could do it without necessarily having to impact a workshop day, which are kind of few and far between, and which Mary would like us to keep as many of those as true workshop days as we can. The other thing, though, that's important to realize in 15-16, it's the ugliest start for the year, because we do not start school until the 8th of September. That basically Labor Day falls as late as it can possibly be, and therefore our end date out into that June 10 date is probably more likely to be the way it is. That will shift from year to year as that Labor Day shifts in terms of when it is during the first week in September. That's going to have an impact, and also when we see a shifting of the Christmas and New Year's actual holidays into the weekend, then that also changes how much or the length of time that we have to have for the winter break, and all of that gives us more flexibility. But for the next couple of years, what we've shared with you really are the only options we see for the 13-14 and the 14-15 year going forward. So I'd stand for any questions, but it's pretty straightforward at this point in terms of, as a board, you need to basically make a determination as to whether you want to try to address something on the 13-14 year. And if so, if this is the legitimate option to go forward with that, and then you want to do something with the 14-15 year, both with the idea that you're going to be making up some staff days, but you're also going to be potentially, if we would really get out into that 6-day range, that we would come back and actually make up 3 student contact days, and at that point physically move what is now the last week of school to the second to the last week of school, and basically kick those last 3 days into the following week. Okay?
So once again, I would prefer to have a motion on the table before we get into discussion, and we could choose to go with the 2013-14 as the first motion, or the 14-15. We're comfortable moving one versus the other, but right in front of you is the 13-14.
I'm sorry, this is not an easy, I can lay it out for you, but this is really one that as a board you're going to have to decide, is there an interest in doing this? And again, I think we've been very, very fortunate compared to the rest of the districts right now around the state, because we didn't really kind of go off the deep end on some of the decisions when it was questionable. But at the same time, you got almost all of February, March, and April, and there's potentially lots of snow, even though we probably aren't going to get the polar vortex, I hope. We surely could get 12 inches of snow and would have the exact same impacts.
Carrie?
I'm going to make a motion to limit our discussion to the 14-15 school year.
Okay. So you're moving to...
I'm making a motion to limit our discussion of the superintendent's recommendation to considering makeup days for the 14-15 school year.
Okay, so you're moving to support the superintendent's recommendation, or just to?
No, I'm
just
moving to limit our discussion to
to it.
considering
A whole
14,
motion, in
15.
other words.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Okay.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Ann. And moved by Carrie. So, discussion on the 2014-15 proposed teacher-student makeup day. I think would be.
I
think we vote
I think
Yeah,
you'd
yeah.
need to vote on the motion to limit it first, and then just attack the 14-15.
Okay, any, okay. All those in favor of approving this motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, discussion.
Okay, so I think you had everybody.
Well, I'll just open up, and my reason for making that motion, limiting it to the 14-15 school year is that I just think we're too far along in 13-14 to realistically think we're gonna get any meaningful teaching days. Not teaching days, but I mean, that we're getting any meaningful learning if we bring the kids back for those 3 weeks, or 3 days. So that's why I wanted to break it up. But with respect to 13-14, I would really encourage our teachers to be very proactive about using our digital technology to make those snow days meaningful. With respect to the 14-15 school year, I guess I just would like to hear from administration about realistically, do they think we could push finals week back for the high school another week? You know, logically it makes sense. If you're going to miss 6 days of school, everyone would be happy to have another few days of school before they have to take their finals. But I guess I just would look to, you know, the education professionals to give us some more insight into that, whether that's realistic to think we're going to get anything out of those 3 days.
Well, if they're taking finals, we will have secondary kids getting something out of it, because the actual preparation for finals then would occur the week before that, which would allow more days up and down the calendar to basically provide additional instruction to prepare kids for their finals, with the idea that the finals then would be held those first 3 days of that second week in June. And I guess in my head, that's seems like if they have that much advance warning, that's the case. And especially now that we have the ability to make up the third day, if it's before February the 13th, we have the ability to actually get that day back. And so now we're really saying at that point, now we're into those days all after the middle of February. Then I think if we have the Armageddon or Snowmageddon of snow years, then I think reasonably we can do that. I think it also ripples down into elementary and middle school. If teachers know that the 3 days the last week are going to be the end, then that's the field days and all the other kinds of things that are typically done the week before get shifted into that last week, and the week before that becomes a pure instructional week. Is it perfect? No. I would much rather get, just like we've talked about the calendar now for the last 6 months, I'd much rather have the days before we take the assessments. But in this next 2 years, I don't see any way to get that built in. There just is no flexibility to get that to happen unless the board is willing to do some more draconian measures, again, like here's the Saturdays you're going to go to school if you miss a week, or here's the spring break you're not going to have, and I'm sorry if you plan to do something on that. And I just realistically don't think those work. Saturdays we're going to have 500 reasons why people can't be there. I think if it's spring break, it's going to be extremely difficult. Now that we have at least 15 years or 20 years of doing spring break the way we've done it. Now, there was a time in this district where we didn't do a 5-day spring break. But that's, I think, is probably back to Charlie. That's probably was back in the Charlie era, so.
1990s.
In the 90s. So since then, you know, nobody that's gone to school in the last decade and a half knows of any approach in terms of dealing with spring break other than what we've currently done. So, you know, as I said, my sense is it the best we could do? No, because if we could have started earlier, we could have built more days in and done a lot of other things. We don't have any of those options. Unlike a lot of other districts, we don't have a lot of teacher workshop days built into the year because we use those PLCs very wisely, an hour a week, every week, you know, throughout the year to do the vast majority of the work that typically we do in professional development. So we really only have the option that I see right now if there's a desire to do something on this end. I showed Danita today, I've been keeping a kind of a log of all the different school districts in terms of what they're doing. Most of them who have been out 5 days are trying to grab 2 back. Except Delano, who was out 4 days, and they're going to get all 4 of them back. They're going to do 2 of them during the year and 2 of them to finish out that first week in June. And I think the only one that has not indicated a desire to make up, I think, is Robbinsdale and St. Paul, I think, that have not yet decided if they're going to make up anything at this point. So a lot of districts are trying to think about what are we going to do here. And I think, you know, although was not born in Alaska and not raised in Alaska, I do not like to call school off. My sense is kids go to school just like the rest of us go to work. You know, there's kind of that expectation, and if I can bring kids in safely, and I know the buses can run, and I've been out and driven the roads or done whatever else I need to do there, we're going to have school whenever that makes sense, even though I know sometimes people will tell me I've lost my mind, and that's their personal opinion. But you know, I guess I don't run school if I can't be out there and drive in it and know that it's going to be safe for kids to be there. And I have no intention of going forward with adding additional days unless there's really a reason to do that. But I'm also concerned about the fact that we could get out to 6 days of without school in the 2014-15 year without doing some kind of makeup for students as well as for staff. So.
Other comments and questions? Bob?
So if a 3rd day is canceled before February 13th, then you get 1 day back automatically because there's that teacher workshop.
Yeah, because that's that teacher workshop day, which we then would drop that. That would become a student contact day. The teachers are already have to be on duty, so that's less groups that we have to turn on a dime to get them back in place. And because it's only a 3-day weekend, the chances of students, you know, going to Bora Bora or whatever are probably less likely than obviously for spring break week. Correct.
And then after February 13th, you have to go to 3 additional days to get any student contact days.
Before you get any student contact days.
Batch of 3 rather than just 1 back.
Right.
So if you miss
4
days or 5 days,
then there'll be teacher days that are made up but not student. Okay. So my sense is it's a pretty remote possibility either way. But I think there has to be, my personal opinion is I think there has to be a way to try to address it. It is not a hill I'm going to die on, though, today. So, you know, as a board, you just need to tell me what you're comfortable with doing and what you think is reasonable. And I guess I've shared with you My sense is, I don't think this is an unreasonable request, and I think if we're looking at only 2014-15, people have plenty of time to figure out that I can't really make plans for those first 3 days in that second week until I see how the weather goes.
Karen?
I just want to clarify my understanding that we've already, this board has already approved the February 16th as a makeup. It's
That
the
is
third day
correct.
as the
That
fourth.
was done at the last board meeting as part of the decision on the 14-15 calendar. That was when we shifted the day that used to be at the end of the first semester. We moved it out into February, identified as a workshop day as opposed to a work day, which we can't do the work day because of the MOU, but we can do the workshop day.
So what we're really considering is if we're in the 4, 5, and 6 days missed.
Right.
That's what.
That's when we're going to start
Yeah.
triggering
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
And it would have to be after that
Yeah.
February 13th date.
Other comments? Julie?
Well, I agree with Carrie, and I think what I'm struggling with is, yes, I mean, 6 days of lost instruction is huge. And we talk about every single day these kids are in school is important. And the loss of 6 school days is absolutely significant. And I agree that looking at it in 14-15 makes a lot more sense in terms of staff being able to have a more planful approach about how to make those meaningful instructional days, which is key. The challenge is how to make meaningful instructional days in June. When I understand about field trips, I'm just wondering if there would be a challenge with so many districts trying to get field days within that narrow time frame, if they would be able to call and say, we want to come a week later. I'm not sure how that would actually work, the way a number of those field trip days probably get maxed out. So to me, the challenge is really how to make that meaningful with the idea that the staff would have that time knowing if this happens. But the other, caveat is we say the target dates of June 8th, 9th, and 10th for 14-15, regardless of when the third cancellation occurred. So, it could be as late. Obviously, we have no control over that because we saw May 4th. It would have triggered June 8th, 9th, and 10th. And, and how unwieldy that could be for a number of situations that could occur.
Other than it won't trigger it unless you get to the full 6 day.
Correct, but if
it's just day 4, you're going to trigger a teacher work day, but you're not going to trigger kids.
No, it
So,
would have to be that.
Yeah, it would have to be all the way out.
We've seen a number of scenarios play out that no one ever thought would ever happen. So
Snow on the 2nd of May was
Right.
out as far as I've ever
So
seen.
you really have to look at it that, the potential exists. Unlikely, but the move and the motion and the vote has to, encompass the fact that it could happen. So, I'm not sure. It's a difficult one.
I'll move the recommendation for 14-15 to if we get to 6 days out, that we would make up 3 in that second week of June.
I'm sorry, so can you say the motion again?
I would move the superintendent's recommendation for 14-15 that if we end up with 6
So
days missed.
as presented?
Yep, as presented.
Oh, okay.
With respect to 14-15.
4 more full day closures.
Well, why don't you just say as presented, because we have it on a
4
chart, we can present
Okay,
the
well,
chart.
she was saying 6, so.
Okay.
Well, 6 with
Yeah.
respect to students.
With students.
Yes, but 4 we'd make up the 2 for as presented in the chart.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
There is a motion on the table to support the superintendent's recommendation for the 2014-15 as presented.
It hasn't been seconded.
No, I'm about to do
that. Okay.
I would like to second that. Moved by Carrie, seconded by Ann. Any discussion on the motion? I actually have discussion before we vote. I have some concern about this has come up on Meet and Confer, and then whenever we do calendars, about the meaningfulness of the last days. And it seems like at some point we need to address that. And to just say that, I understand that field, if the last few days are field trips, that is really hard to reschedule. But I was thinking about Arcadia and Prairie Creek's presentation and how they grappled with that and came up with, you know, the May term, you know, thought about after testing dates, what did they do? And the 4th and 5th graders doing their PEEPS interdisciplinary project. And it seems like at some point, we shouldn't always feel handcuffed that we can't put days on. I can understand that, you know, families make vacation plans and doing it in the same year is really hard. But if you start to establish something and you start to think about what does learning look like, and I understand, you know, your perspective, Dr. Richardson, that those testing days before, because we're judged on the testing. But I just think there's a lot of freedom after testing of what learning could look like. And so I just have to put it out there that that really bothers me. And then I guess the other piece that I thought, which we kind of talked about, is that if we think about this in the future, just thinking about, is there ever going to be but I think if you do it a year in advance, but is there ever going to be a cutoff date if we're thinking about what those learning days look like at the end? Do we say, you know, after April 15th, we just have to, you know, it is what it is. That's not enough planning time. But think about it that way too. So, anyway. Rob?
What we did last time with the asterisk part of this, would convert a teacher workshop day to a student contact day. If the current motion fails, then that teacher workshop day there's no provision for making that up.
No, we already.
No, that's already an approved calendar. So all we're really doing here is saying is that beyond the 3 days, because what's already in the calendar, Rob, that you approved, was that if it's before the 13th or before, you go to school on the 16th, and that's a teacher and student makeup day. If it's after the 13th, it's a teacher makeup day on June 8th. So those two lines are already in the calendar that you've approved. So really, all you're really dealing with is what happens on day 4, 5, or 6. If we get beyond that, then that's where we start adding on additional either teacher workshop work days or student days if we get clear out to 6.
Okay.
So that shouldn't change. That won't change whatever you do this time.
So the February 16th, if it has to become a student contact day, that's lost as a teacher workshop day. But I'm just wondering, is that what you then move to in the current motion is, first of all, making up a bunch of teacher workshop days, but that initial one, if we lose it, isn't made up at some point later on. It just converts.
It just converts, right. That if it's before the 13th of February, we just lose that day. And again, I'm sure, as Mary would tell you, the problem is at that point then we have to think about what does that workshop day look like, because we can't really hire someone to come in and do a presentation for us with the off chance that we lose it, and then we'd have to pay for the presenter and wouldn't have the ability to have teachers do that. So that actually goes backwards, but what it does do is puts a student contact day dead in the middle of the sweet spot of good instruction, which is kind of that's the trade-off if that happens. The other thing I'd share with you, the most interesting thing I've looked at in terms of all these different districts, of course, is Farmington. Farmington has what's called an innovation zone. They and Spring Lake Park are the only 2 districts in the state that do not have to operate under most of the rules of the department, and they were selected as the only 2 schools to try out this pilot. They are developing what they call virtual instruction days, where they just basically say, and they miss 5 days, but we can't do what Farmington's doing. They will not allow us to do that because we are locked into the normal calendar and normal schedule.
Well, we don't have Wi-Fi for everyone either to do it.
No, but they don't either. They don't either. They're going to do Wi-Fi for those who have it and other alternatives for those that don't have it. Probably something that, again, I think that's going to come along as we go, because, I think we talked before about a couple of teachers that even on that 6th of January sent information out to kids saying, on their Schoology, here's your assignments for tomorrow, be prepared to deal with them, and, they have them and they're able to look at them, whatever. But again, can 100% of the kids right now do that? No, they can't.
We have talked to the city though about that HRA, and they're taking our suggestion a little bit further with that. And our statistic, actually, I just saw Farmington published that they have the same percentage of students with Wi-Fi at home as we do. They published a 94% statistic. And what we're looking at with I'm not even sure what HRA stands
The
for.
Housing and Redevelopment.
There's a potential for a grant, and we had looked at trying to partner with them about putting some kind of Wi-Fi repeater in a particular neighborhood, but we can't narrow down a geographic region in the district where that would make the most sense. But what we're looking at is seeing if the grant would potentially pay for wireless hotspots that the district could purchase and check out like a library book. So for the year I meet certain criteria, I potentially could check out a Verizon or a Sprint wireless hotspot that I could take home, regardless if I live in the country or I live in town and just don't have access to that because of my socioeconomic condition. So we're going down that road, and it'll be interesting to see if they'll go with it on that.
In June 2015, I don't have the calendar with me. Do you remember when graduation is then? Because you would end up with a situation, wouldn't you, where if you had a graduating senior and another child, that other child would just be in school even longer after graduation.
Yes,
And that's
June 31st.
absolutely true.
May.
May 31st. So yeah, you'd have then that other student in school for another 8 days. I don't know how to fix that, and I know that's another one of those, you have third rails of things like Social Security and Medicare and whatever, but the third rail of calendar operation is do not change the date for graduation on people, because you will suddenly have an entire population of folks going, what? I've already scheduled all this stuff and I did it a year ahead of time. So I would never suggest that to you as a wise strategy.
Julie?
Well, so I appreciate your comments, Ellen, in terms of the challenge to make those meaningful instruction days, and that this does allow for a more planful approach to that. But then you also said something about maybe making a cutoff, like April 15th, because right now it's written regardless of when the third cancellation occurred. So is that something you were possibly suggesting for 14-15?
Well, I thought if depending on what you looked at, how those days, end of the day, year days looked, at some point it's not possible to change your plans if there's something really terrific. They're always terrific learning experiences, but at some point it depends on what the vision is for how those days are used.
So is that a possible suggestion as a modification of this recommendation of currently saying regardless of when the
I'm not allowed to modify the
Oh,
motion.
I'm sorry. Well,
but it was something that I was suggesting.
But somebody could make an amendment, could
Okay,
amend
good.
the motion to do that. And with a second and a vote, you could actually have that amended motion.
Okay, so I think that's what I'm going to do, because I thought, as I was thinking about it, that was something that was uncomfortable for me to say, regardless of when the third cancellation occurred, which we know could be May, and then you're triggering something, 4 weeks later. So, okay, so I'm going to move to amend the motion to state that the third cancellation would need to occur prior to April 15th. That needs to be a school day?
April 15th is a Wednesday.
15th. So that
To April 13th or 15th?
April 15th of 14th.
Everybody remembers.
15th.
It would be
15th.
Tax day.
Mhm.
Oh, sure. Is that clear? to
Now,
you?
is that going to be for staff and students, or just for students?
Actually, you're talking about the fourth cancellation day, aren't you?
Can I offer a friendly
Yes, we were going to
suggestion?
have.
Is it the third or the fourth cancellation?
Well, if I could just suggest that Julie, I think what she intends by her motion is that the teacher workshop target date would be June 8th and June 9th. If we miss 4 days, if the third cancellation was on or before April 15th. But it has to be that we've missed 4 days. Is that what you're saying? Or you're looking at the
Regardless
agenda?
of when the third cancellation occurred.
Oh, never mind,
For
I'm
student days.
completely screwing it up.
No, that's right. I
Okay.
appreciate the,
So
So
what
the
you're doing, you're
clarification,
modifying
are
that
you just
cell.
basically asking?
That we would lock in whatever this grid has by April 15th. So at April 15th, if we're at 4 days, we would go with what is in the grid for the fourth day. If we're at 5 days, but beyond that, if we had snow days after that, we wouldn't make those pieces up. Is that what, I'm just clarifying in terms of from
no,
what
I
I was hearing.
appreciate the request for clarification.
It's like a frozen moment that if whatever happens before April 15th
pun
happens,
intended.
yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yes, I was specifically looking at student days, so in terms of this proposed rescheduling matrix that we have, it would be days missed of 6. So it would be really triggering student days.
So it would change the words and just block 6.
Correct.
Mhm.
Okay.
So that the teacher work days would still trigger as presented. It would be that 6th student day where it says regardless of when the third cancellation occurred to prior to April 15th, 2015. So if that 6th day, it snows on April 16th, then we don't
All
make it
bets
up.
are off.
All bets are off.
Yeah, so really the part of the chart we need to adjust is really just under block 6 with target dates June 8, 9, 10 prior to April 15th.
Correct.
2015.
Right, so that would really be the only fix you'd have to make.
Correct.
Because you're going to have teachers back either 3 or 4 days if they get out into that territory, but for kids, you get the student contact days, but only if it's between the 16th of February and the 15th of April.
Correct.
So we've got an amended motion on the table. Is there a second?
Second amendment.
Carrie seconding the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment, or if we go ahead and vote on the amendment? Any discussion on the amendment?
So this is Julie's amendment. that
Yeah,
voting
we're
on.
just, if we have any discussion on the amendment. Mhm. All those in favor of amending the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any discussion now on the 2014-15? So we amended the motion, but we haven't,
Proposal as amended.
yep, we amended the proposal, but we haven't actually voted on it. So, Carrie?
Can I just restate so I'm
Absolutely.
very
That
clear
would be
what we're
really
voting
helpful
on
for
here?
everyone. Good idea.
Get this down, Danita, because
I just want to be
I don't
clear.
get it either. Okay, go ahead.
So my understanding of the motion as amended, which I guess is my motion as amended by
Mhm.
Julie's motion, is that the cell that refers to 4 days missed, the recommendation would stand as presented. The cell
Correct.
that with respect to 5 days missed would stand as presented.
Mhm.
The cell with respect to 6 days missed would stand, but that third line that says regardless of when the third cancellation occurred would require that the 6th day lost by students would occur before April 15th. Is that,
Mhm.
do I have that accurately?
Correct. So, and we're doing prior to the 15th rather than prior to the 16th, so it's April 15th.
So is that on or before April 15th?
Let's say it as simply as we can.
Yep.
You've already passed the amendment that you said prior to April.
Okay,
You said prior to April
Okay.
15th, so that's what you got.
Okay.
Okay.
And so the
Yeah, that
so
would be
we
the
miss-
only
we miss-
change.
So we missed 4 days. We've got one or possibly two one workshop day added on. We missed 5 days. We've got 2 workshop days added on. We missed 6 days of school. We've got 3 student contact days added on, as long as those 6 days occurred before April 15th.
Correct.
Is that accurate? Okay.
Correct.
Just so we all know what we're voting on.
And at that point, teachers would have also have another workshop day on the 11th.
Mhm. Yeah.
If that happens.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make this as difficult as it was.
No,
but
I just want to be real clear what
I'm
we're
just
voting
was
on.
trying to have us work ourselves through
Yeah.
this.
Okay.
Other comments or questions?
It's just a little bit hard to support something that's so hard to explain even to ourselves and to try to explain it to everybody else. This is what we've just done to you. It's really...
I think we'll be able to communicate by saying, we are going to make up these days. If there are 6 days lost prior to April 15th, we will be in school. It could potentially be that simple, Dr. Richardson, in terms of communicating.
Well, I think, yeah, right now what we're saying is if it's before the 16th, we're teachers and kids will make up the day on the 16th. If it's after that, we have basically up to 3 additional days of teacher workshop, and if we get out to the 4th day, basically there'll be 6 days total. We basically would be in a situation where there would be 3 more days of student contact and 1 more day of teacher contact. We'll work on that. We played with this chart before. We'll figure out a way to do it.
And I think an important thing is that what we have right now is complete ambiguity, in terms of we don't have a plan for making up additional days, so people are confused. I think that this, while still a little bit tricky, at least puts a plan into place that we can articulate. Yep, when this piece occurs, here's what happens. And I think, Rob, some of that will have to be explained when we get to day 3 and but at least we have a plan in place that people understand. They know what they're doing. They're not reacting. They're being proactive. I think it puts us in a little bit better position than we are now. And I think we all hope we never get 6 days canceled in a school year.
I'll have to move back to Alaska.
Well, and I think to Matt's point, we've also clarified for families that will be reading lots of headlines about what other districts are doing, that in fact we aren't going to do anything as a district for this year, so that parents and families can be able to plan and not think that, like other districts, we're going to continue to review it or make adjustments.
Well, and if I may just jump in here, Judy, I think you just said it very simply when you said in 14-15, nothing will be triggered unless there are 6 days missed by April 15th, 2015.
Yeah, there'll be nothing. There'll be no additional time for kids, unless we're at 6 days prior to April 15th.
As simple as that, if you will.
Yeah, I mean that's the clear message. And for teachers, we can tell staff what it needs to be. The other thing that I will go back and just double check in terms of is just making sure we're okay on hours, and we should be just fine because we had so many extra hours. I think we can lose these days and even more and still not have to make up. The trigger is going to be, oh God forbid, I don't even want to say this. You get to 9 days, we're in trouble because then. By law, we have to make up the day regardless because we have to have at least 165 days of school.
That would be out of our hands at that point.
But at that point, Snowmageddon will have struck it multiple times. So. Okay.
Ann, do you have anything you want to add? No? Okay. All right, well, we have the amended motion and a second on the table, and we had a clarification, so I think unless everybody's clear on what we're voting on, is we already had voted on the chart above with the February 13th, so what we are really looking at is the 4th, 5th, and 6th rows, and the one amended piece, which is striking the regardless of when the third cancellation and saying if the 6-day loss would have to be prior to April 13th. So, if there's no further discussion, all those in favor of that motion say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
And I think what we'll do is avoid the chart altogether and try just to create a couple of real simple statements. For students, this means. For staff, this means. And try to go at it that way. We were trying to be very mindful and thoughtful in terms of the charting, but obviously sometimes the chart can mess you up just as much as the words can.
I think maybe if there had been 3 columns instead of just 2, one for students and one for staff. Make it a bigger table instead of a small one.
Well, and it depends too, because even in that setting, there are certain staff that are impacted and others that are not. Because actually they start losing. Unfortunately, a lot of our other staff members who are hourly employees actually begin getting paid deductions after the second day, which they can't make up unless kids are back. So if you're an EA or if you're a food service employee, you actually just have to, you're going to operate with fewer dollars in your pocket if we have lots of snow days. So, we've been kind of focusing on teachers, but there's a whole bunch of other folks that are going to be impacted differently based on what happens. As I said, I don't plan to do any more. No more.
All right, we have a third item of individual action, which is a resolution. This is a resolution that we do every year.
Every year. And basically that resolution is the first step in addressing, if we need to, the potential of reduction of programming or staffing if we would be in a situation where funding would require us to do so. Again, as we've shared with you, we do not anticipate that in any area other than the potential in Title I. And the issue there is we are still waiting, and I'm gathering we'll probably continue to wait for the Department of Education at the federal level to determine what the impact of sequestration is for the 2014-15 year. And the difference, if you remember, for Title I is where with everybody else when we make reductions in FTEs. But when it comes to Title I, we have to make reductions based on what the actual salaries are of the employees that are in those positions. And you absolutely can't spend more money than you have. So, over the years, we've had individuals that have voluntarily reduced their positions and done other things because they wanted to stay in a Title I role. And again, very much appreciate that, but there may be a point, and it may be this year, where we no longer have enough flexibility to let that happen, because if we do, we'd end up having the level of FTE for Title not be able to provide the services that we need to do for kids. And in that case, we actually might have to do some reductions in staff, or which wouldn't be necessarily Title I teachers at a high level who are high on the seniority list, but it would be Title I teachers having to shift back into a regular ed position where their position is based on seniority, and then the newest teachers hired having to potentially be reduced in order to make room for the Title I teachers that would have to go into their places. And again, that's really the first time we have dealt with that. We've always basically had some slight increases in Title I each year, and we've been able to keep a fund balance in Title. But we actually ended up, Mary, was 13% cut for this year. They had thought it would be, initially we were told 5, then they told us it would be 10, then the actual cut came and it was 13. And so every bit of carryover we had in title, we spent just to keep people in place that already were contracted for this year. Plus we had to take money out of Title II and help fund those positions. We cannot do that 2 years in a row because we have no balances left in those accounts. So as I said, that's the place where we may have to come back, and this would actually come into practice.
And Chris, the other piece too is just, especially at the secondary level, as students register for courses, there are from time to time you'll see an increase in one elective area where more kids are taking, where we have to increase FTE in one elective area and maybe reduce it in another because of a lack of enrollment. And that's what this particular resolution also gives us flexibility to, is to react to what students are voting for with their schedules.
All right. I would ask for a motion to support the superintendent's recommendation on the resolution.
So moved.
Moved by Rob.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Ann. Any discussion?
And this needs a roll call
Right.
again because it's resolution.
Maple?
Aye.
Pritchard?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Hardy?
Aye.
And Iverson?
Aye.
Motion carries.
We are ready to move on to items in the consent grouping, and I will remind board members that there were a few additional items added to your table file. And as Dr. Richardson mentioned, the Greenville Park exciting overnight field trip. Is there anything anyone wishes to pull from the consent grouping? Ask for a motion to approve the consent grouping.
So moved.
Moved by Julie.
Second.
Second by Carrie. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Items for information, you have the enrollment report.
And again, as I've told you for the last 10 years, just about the same, although as you'll notice right now, we are probably at our highest point this year. We're sitting at 3,900 students in terms of the enrollment as of February the 1st. We will likely see that decline over the next several months as we move toward the end of the year. But again, we just are flat on in terms of maintaining those enrollment numbers.
Up?
For ALC, what does I/S stand for? Is full-time, part-time, and IS?
Independent study. So those are students from typically from the high school that are looking at credit recovery, and so they're going to the ALC after hours to basically complete a course that they need to make up so that they can graduate on time. And so ALC has the capability of doing seat time programs during the day, but also doing independent study for kids who need to do credit recovery.
Good question. All right. Future meetings, we have another one in February 24th at 7 p.m. and then Monday, March 10th, which is our only board meeting scheduled in the month of March. With that, I would ask for a motion for adjournment. Moved by Carrie. Second. Seconded by Ann. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting is adjourned.